Bradley Gonzales, 41, looked like an ordinary warehouse compliance manager from Columbus, Ohio. Vanessa Carter believed she had outgrown him years ago. Most people agreed, after seeing his old Ford truck, cracked phone screen, and small Maple Ridge house. What they didn't know was that Bradley approved executive risk reports at Meridian Atlas. Vanessa smiled and introduced her new boyfriend to the kids. Derek Whitmore reached to shake Bradley's hand. Then Derek recognized his face. The whiskey glass froze inches from his mouth. Comment your country and local time below. I always like seeing where these stories reach. And if you enjoy slow burn stories about betrayal, quiet power, and people being underestimated, subscribe now. Tomorrow's story gets even more dangerous. The dinner reservation was for 7:30 at Tuscany Grill in Westerville. Vanessa texted Bradley twice that afternoon to remind him not to be difficult in front of the kids. Bradley never answered. At 7:24 p.m., his old gray Ford rolled quietly into the restaurant parking lot beside a black Range Rover with temporary tags. Rainwater reflected the yellow restaurant lights across the pavement. Bradley shut off the engine and sat still for a second, one hand resting on the steering wheel. Inside the restaurant smelled like garlic butter and expensive wine. Soft jazz floated through the dining room. Couples leaned close across candlelit tables. A waiter in a white shirt carried a tray stacked with martinis toward the back bar. Vanessa had chosen a corner booth near the windows. Strategic, visible. She wore a cream-colored blazer and gold earrings Bradley recognized from their 10th anniversary trip to Chicago. Derek Whitmore sat beside her instead of across from her. Too close, too familiar, territorial. Ava noticed Bradley first. Dad's here. Her voice carried relief she tried to hide. Mason jumped out of the booth immediately. Dad, guess what Derek says? He almost bought a Ferrari one time. Bradley smiled faintly and hugged his son. Almost buying things is still free. Mason laughed. Vanessa didn't. Derek stood slowly this time, more carefully than before. His confidence from the patio introduction had thinned around the edges. He extended his hand again, but there was calculation behind it now. Bradley, he said smoothly. Good to officially meet you. Bradley shook his hand once. Firm, brief. Derek's smile held, but Bradley noticed the pulse beating harder near his jaw. The waiter arrived with menus. Derek immediately took control of the table. You have to try the ribeye here, he told Ava. Best steak in Columbus. Ava looked at Bradley instead. Bradley shrugged lightly. You still like the chicken parmesan better. She does. Vanessa cut in quickly. But Derek's trying to get them to branch out more. Branch out. Everything with Vanessa had become branding language over the last 2 years. Bradley opened his menu without comment. Derek ordered a 12-ounce ribeye truffle fries and a Macallan 18. Vanessa ordered sea bass and white wine. Bradley asked for lasagna and water. Derek noticed. Just water, I'm driving. The answer landed flat and clean. For the next 20 minutes, Derek performed. That was the word Bradley kept returning to in his head. Performed. Derek talked about high-level consulting, about leadership seminars in Austin, about private equity groups in Denver, about scaling companies and optimizing infrastructure. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, polished for rooms full of investors and executives. Vanessa watched him with visible satisfaction. She wanted the comparison, the successful man beside her, the quiet man across from her. Bradley kept cutting Mason's food into smaller pieces while Derek talked about venture capital strategy. Ava noticed that too. So what exactly do you do again? Derek finally asked. Not aggressive, not openly, but deliberate. Vanessa reached for her wine glass without looking up. Bradley dabbed a napkin across his mouth before answering. Risk compliance. Derek nodded slowly. Warehouse side part of it. That sound stable? There it was. Vanessa smiled faintly into her wine. Bradley leaned back slightly in the booth. Calm, comfortable, Impossible to provoke. It pays the mortgage. Mason interrupted before the silence could sharpen. Dad fixed the sink last week by himself. That's great, Buddy Derek said quickly. Good skills to have. Ava stared at Derek for half a second too long. Children noticed tone faster than adults did. The waiter returned with drinks. Derek lifted his whiskey glass. You know, he said casually, I've actually been talking with a pretty major logistics tech company lately. Big expansion stuff. Vanessa looked impressed, though Bradley doubted she even understood the details. Really, she asked. Yeah, Meridian Atlas. The name settled quietly onto the table. Bradley reached for his water without changing expression. But Derek watched him carefully now, testing, waiting. They're building something huge, Derek continued. Security, integration, federal transport systems, predictive routing, serious money involved. Ava looked confused. Mason was busy stacking straws. Bradley took a sip of water. Sounds competitive. It is. Derek smiled. They're selective, I'm sure. For the first time all evening, Derek looked uncertain about where to place his eyes, because Bradley had not reacted incorrectly. No intimidation, no surprise, nothing emotional. And that was the problem. People who were actually powerless usually tried harder to prove they weren't. Vanessa suddenly turned toward Bradley. You could probably learn something from Derek professionally. The sentence hung there like cheap perfume. Ava immediately looked down at her plate. Mason stopped chewing. Bradley folded his napkin carefully beside his glass. Maybe. That answer irritated Vanessa more than a fight would have. Derek stepped in quickly. No, hey, different paths work for different people? Bradley finally looked directly at him then. Just for a second. Long enough. Derek looked away first. Dinner continued, but the rhythm had changed. Derek drank faster. Bradley noticed because that was what Bradley did for a living. Observe patterns, tiny shifts, stress indicators. By the second whiskey, Derek's confidence loosened around the seams. So, how long have you been with warehouse compliance? Derek asked. Long enough. Must be interesting seeing how operations work from the inside. Sometimes. Vanessa sighed quietly. Bradley could almost predict her frustration before it appeared. She hated conversations she couldn't control. Bradley's calmness made manipulation difficult because he never filled silence to defend himself. Mason suddenly blurted out, Derek got really mad at a guy driving last Tuesday. Vanessa froze. Derek laughed too quickly. Road rage in Columbus traffic happens to everybody. He yelled the F word 3 times, Mason clarified proudly. A couple at the next table glanced over. Vanessa shot her son a warning look. Mason. What he asked innocently. Bradley reached over and adjusted the boy's napkin. What happened after that? Derek answered before Mason could. Nothing happened. Some idiot cut me off. Bradley nodded once, simple, neutral. But he stored the detail away automatically. Ava had gone quiet again. She watched Derek the way Bradley watched audit reports. Carefully, quietly, children trusted consistency more than charisma. When dinner finally ended, Vanessa insisted Derek walk them all outside together like adults. The rain had stopped. The pavement still glistened black under the parking lot lamps. Mason climbed into Bradley's truck first. Ava lingered beside him. You okay? Bradley asked softly. She nodded, but not convincingly. Across the parking lot, Derek stood beside Vanessa's Range Rover, pretending to check messages on his phone. But Bradley noticed the screen reflection in the dark window. LinkedIn. And Bradley already knew exactly whose profile Derek was searching for. Bradley Gonzales met Vanessa Carter in 2009, back when neither of them had enough money to pretend they were above ordinary life. She was 21, working weekends at a boutique clothing store outside Dayton, while finishing her real estate license classes online. Bradley was already working long hours in logistics compliance, wearing steel-toe boots and carrying a lunchbox with his initials scratched into the plastic lid. Back then, Vanessa loved the stability. She loved that Bradley showed up early to everything, that he paid bills before due dates, that he remembered oil changes, dentist appointments, and birthdays without reminders. She once told her sister that dating Bradley felt safe in a world full of flaky men. The first apartment they shared sat above a laundromat with thin walls and unreliable heat. Bradley spent 2 weekends repainting the kitchen cabinets because Vanessa mentioned she hated the color yellow. He never brought it up again afterward. That was how Bradley operated. Quiet effort. No performance attached to it. The changes started slowly after Vanessa entered high-end real estate. Columbus housing exploded during the early 2010s. New development spread through Dublin, Powell, and New Albany. Vanessa adapted fast. Designer jackets replaced discount store sweaters. Networking events replaced evenings at home. The people around her became louder, richer, more polished. And Bradley stayed exactly the same. Same truck, same habits, same quiet voice. At first, Vanessa joked about it. "You still dress like you're unloading cargo ships," she laughed once before a charity dinner. Bradley looked down at his dark flannel shirt. "It's comfortable. You own exactly 3 colors. I like those colors." Back then, she still laughed affectionately afterward. But affection faded gradually, then publicly. By 2018, the comments sharpened. "You never want more. You don't push yourself. You're invisible in every room." Bradley rarely defended himself, not because he lacked answers, because he had learned early that emotional people often revealed more than calm people did. So he listened and remembered. The first time Vanessa mocked him in front of other people happened during a 4th of July barbecue in Upper Arlington. One of Vanessa's clients had asked Bradley what he did for work. "Compliance and risk management," Bradley answered. Vanessa smiled into her wine glass. "That's his way of saying paperwork." Everyone laughed politely. Bradley smiled once and kept grilling burgers. But that night after Vanessa fell asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen counter and opened a folder on his laptop labeled Documentation. Inside were screenshots, schedules, receipts, emails. Nothing dramatic at first, just records, because Bradley trusted patterns more than arguments. The folder grew larger after the children were born, especially after Ava. Vanessa's career accelerated fast once social media became central to real estate marketing. She built a polished online presence filled with luxury kitchens, rooftop wine tastings, and smiling client photos. Bradley appeared less and less, at first accidentally, then intentionally. "You don't really fit the brand," Vanessa admitted one night while editing photos on her phone. Bradley sat at the other end of the couch, assembling Mason's toy fire truck. "What brand?" She sighed heavily. "You know what I mean." He did. By the time Mason turned 6, Vanessa had started introducing Bradley differently at events. Instead of saying what he did, she said things like "Bradley's more low-key," or "he prefers staying behind the scenes." The translation was obvious: not ambitious enough, not impressive enough, not useful socially. The divorce conversation happened on a Tuesday in February during freezing rain. Vanessa stood in the kitchen wearing a camel-colored coat she hadn't taken off yet. "I can't keep pretending this marriage works." Bradley looked up from helping Ava with math homework. Ava noticed the tone immediately. Children always did. Bradley closed the workbook gently. "Go help your brother brush his teeth." Ava hesitated, then obeyed. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're a good father," she said, "but I feel like I'm carrying this entire life by myself." Bradley studied her quietly. The kitchen light reflected against the marble countertop she had insisted on remodeling 2 years earlier. "What exactly are you carrying?" The question irritated her instantly. Ambition, direction, momentum. Bradley nodded once. "And the kids? What about them? You gone 3 nights a week, open houses on weekends, travel conferences." Vanessa scoffed. "Now you're trying to guilt me, no." And that was the frustrating thing about Bradley. He never gave emotional people enough chaos to feed on. The divorce finalized 11 months later in Franklin County Family Court. No screaming, no dramatic custody war, no public accusations. Bradley accepted 50-50 custody immediately. Vanessa expected more resistance. Instead, Bradley focused on specifics: school transportation, medical insurance, emergency contacts, calendar structure. He reviewed every clause carefully before signing. Naomi Price entered his life during that period. She was a family attorney in downtown Columbus known for brutal preparation and almost surgical courtroom precision. Mid-40s, sharp gray suits, never raised her voice. The first thing she told Bradley during their consultation stayed with him afterward. "Emotion is temporary," she said. "Documentation survives." Bradley appreciated that. After the divorce, Vanessa's behavior became stranger in subtle ways, not openly hostile, performative. She posted photos online from rooftop bars in Chicago with captions about finally choosing growth. She uploaded motivational quotes about leaving behind people who fear success. Friends commented support beneath every post. Bradley never responded publicly. Instead, he coached Mason's Little League team on Thursdays. He drove Ava to debate club every Wednesday morning because she hated taking the early school bus. He learned how to braid Ava's hair from YouTube tutorials after she complained he made the ponytails too tight. Ordinary things, invisible things, the kind people rarely celebrated online. One November evening, Ava sat beside him in the garage while he replaced brake pads on the truck. "Mom says you could have done more with your life." The sentence came carefully, like she regretted saying it halfway through. Bradley kept loosening bolts without reacting. "Your mom and I see success differently." Ava frowned slightly. "You ever want to be rich?" Bradley finally looked at her then. Cold air drifted through the open garage. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice. "I want you and Mason safe," he said. "Everything else is extra." Ava nodded slowly. Children understood sincerity faster than adults. Months later, Vanessa introduced Derek Whitmore into their lives. And almost immediately, Bradley noticed similarities between Derek and Vanessa's newer social circle. Expensive watch, perfect teeth, aggressive confidence, too polished. Men like Derek filled rooms loudly because silence made them nervous. That first handshake at the patio had confirmed something else too. Recognition. Not casual recognition. Fear recognition. The kind that happened when someone suddenly realized the ordinary man standing in front of them was connected to something much larger than expected. Late Sunday night after the Tuscany Grill dinner, Bradley sat alone in his Maple Ridge kitchen, reviewing emails on his laptop. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A notification appeared in the corner of the screen. LinkedIn profile view, Derek Whitmore. Bradley stared at the notification for a moment, then calmly opened Meridian Atlas's executive candidate database. Derek Whitmore's application file waited there unopened under Senior Operations Strategist Review. Bradley clicked it once, and the first thing he noticed made his eyes narrow slightly. 2 employment dates overlapped in a way they shouldn't have. Meridian Atlas did not put its name on billboards. That was the first thing most people noticed when they tried researching the company. No flashy commercials, no social media campaigns, no interviews with smiling founders on business podcasts. The company operated differently, quietly. Its headquarters stood in downtown Columbus behind dark reflective glass and layered security gates. From the outside, the 30-story building looked like another financial firm buried among law offices and insurance companies. Inside, Meridian Atlas managed logistics security infrastructure connected to federal transportation systems, pharmaceutical distribution chains, and defense subcontractors across 12 states. The company handled too much sensitive movement to attract attention. which was exactly why they paid people like Bradley Gonzales extremely well. At 6:10 Monday morning, Bradley parked his Ford F-15 inside the employee garage beneath the building. Most executives arrived later in imported sedans or chauffeured SUVs. Bradley preferred early mornings, before the elevators filled with noise and cologne. He carried the same black travel mug he'd used for years. No one looking at him would guess he signed off on 7-figure executive risk approvals. The security guard at Checkpoint C nodded immediately. "Morning, Mr. Gonzales." "Morning, Ray." Bradley scanned his badge and stepped through the security corridor. 2 layers of reinforced glass unlocked in sequence with soft hydraulic clicks. By the time he entered the executive review floor on level 27, Columbus was still dark outside the windows. His office reflected almost nothing about his actual authority. No expensive art, no awards on display. 1 frame photo of Ava and Mason at Cedar Point. A shelf of compliance manuals, 2 monitors, a gray desk. That was it. Bradley sat down and reopened Derek Whitmore's application file. Senior Operations Strategist candidate. Projected compensation package $420,000 annually, plus equity incentives. Recommendation status strong internal interest. Bradley read slowly. People revealed themselves through inconsistencies long before they revealed themselves emotionally. Derek's resume was polished almost aggressively. Every sentence sounded optimized by someone who understood executive recruiting psychology, transformational leadership, cross-functional optimization, strategic growth architecture. Bradley hated language like that. Real operators described outcomes. Performers described themselves. He opened the employment timeline again. Helix Core Consulting, March 2018, August 2022, North Point Systems, January 2021, present, overlap, possible consulting arrangement, possible lie. Bradley highlighted the section once, then opened internal verification protocols. At 6:42 a.m., his assistant director walked into the office carrying coffee. Evelyn Cho had worked under Bradley for 6 years. Precise, methodical, former Air Force intelligence analyst. She noticed details before most people noticed problems existed. "You're early," she said. Bradley rotated 1 monitor toward her. New strategist candidate. Evelyn scanned the file quickly. "Whitmore? Timeline inconsistency." She leaned closer. "Could be concurrent contract work." "Could be." Bradley tapped the desk lightly once. Reference email bounced last night. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting." Bradley never rushed investigations. Meridian Atlas avoided emotional decisions because emotional decisions created lawsuits. Everything had to survive documentation review. Everything. "Open a level 2 verification," Bradley said calmly. "Full review, quietly." Evelyn nodded once. No further questions. That was another reason Bradley trusted her. By 8:15 a.m., the executive floor had filled with movement. Glass conference rooms glowed with presentation screens and financial projections. Analysts moved between departments carrying encrypted tablets. Bradley barely noticed most of it anymore. His phone vibrated once. Vanessa. He stared at the screen before answering. "What's wrong?" Her tone sharpened immediately. "Nothing's wrong." "Why would something need to be wrong? You only call this early if something's wrong." A pause. "I just wanted to tell you Derek's taking the kids to COSI on Saturday." Bradley opened an email attachment without reacting. "Okay, that's it. What response were you expecting?" Vanessa exhaled heavily through the phone. "You know normal people communicate." Bradley continued reviewing Derek's application history. "They'll enjoy COSI." Another pause. Then the real purpose surfaced. "Derek thinks you don't like him." Bradley leaned back in his chair slowly. "I barely know him. He says you're cold around him." Bradley almost smiled at that. Cold. Interesting word. People often described calm men as cold because they couldn't easily control them. I'm polite, Bradley answered. You're distant. No Vanessa. I'm careful. Silence. Brief. Dangerous. Vanessa changed directions immediately. Well, Derek's very good with the kids. Bradley looked through the office glass wall toward downtown Columbus. Morning traffic crawled below in thin silver lines. Mason says he yells while driving. Vanessa reacted too fast. Oh my God. Are we seriously doing this, doing what you know exactly what? Bradley remained quiet. And again, silence cornered her more effectively than accusations would have. He just got frustrated in traffic once she snapped. Normal adults get frustrated. Bradley ended the call 2 minutes later without raising his voice once. At 10:07 a.m., Evelyn returned carrying a thin printed report. Got something. Bradley motioned for her to continue. The North Point Systems title doesn't exist. That caught his attention immediately. What do you mean? I called corporate verification. They have Whitmore listed as Regional Process Advisor, not Senior Strategic Director. Inflated title. Classic executive padding. Still not enough alone, but enough to continue digging. Evelyn placed another paper on the desk, and Helix Corps wouldn't verify rehire eligibility. Bradley read the line twice. Corporate HR departments avoided that wording unless legal departments instructed them carefully. Any reason given, number keep pulling. Evelyn hesitated briefly. Personal connection here, Bradley looked up at her. His girlfriend is my ex-wife. Evelyn blinked once, only once. Then she nodded slowly. That complicates optics. Yes. You want reassignment? Bradley considered it. Policy allowed recusal if personal conflicts threatened neutrality. But recusal also transferred the case to another director, unfamiliar with the subtle inconsistencies already surfacing. And Bradley trusted systems more than appearances. No, he answered finally. Everything stays documented. Full transparency. Evelyn studied him carefully. You okay? Bradley thought about the question honestly. Vanessa introducing Derek to the children. This quickly bothered him, not emotionally, structurally. People rushing intimacy around children often rushed other things too. Fine, he said. And for Bradley, fine usually meant focused. That afternoon, Meridian Atlas held a senior operations review meeting on level 31. The executive conference room overlooked the Scioto River through floor-to-ceiling glass. 12 department heads sat around the black walnut table discussing federal expansion contracts worth nearly $200 million. Bradley rarely spoke unless necessary, but when he did, people listened, because Bradley never guessed. Near the end of the meeting, COO Martin Feldman reviewed upcoming strategist interviews. Whitmore's getting strong support from recruiting, Martin said. Good presentation skills. Big picture thinker. Bradley flipped one page inside his folder. No recommendation yet? Martin looked toward him. Problem verification pending. Martin immediately stopped speaking. That was the weight Bradley's department carried inside Meridian Atlas. No executive moved forward against risk integrity advisement. Not once in the company's history. After the meeting, Bradley returned to his office and found another LinkedIn notification waiting. Derek Whitmore had viewed his profile again, this time for 11 consecutive minutes. Bradley opened the profile analytics. Most viewers skimmed profiles quickly. 11 minutes meant panic reading. He stared at the screen quietly. Then his office phone rang. Internal line. Evelyn again. You need to hear this, she said. Bradley picked up a pen automatically. What is it? Helix Corps' former CFO agreed to unofficially talk off record. And a pause. Then Evelyn lowered her voice slightly. He asked if Whitmore was applying for financial authority access. Bradley's expression changed for the first time all day. Small, sharp, controlled? Yes, Bradley answered carefully. Another pause. Then Evelyn spoke the sentence slowly. He told me to be very careful with him. 3 days after the dinner at Tuscany Grill, Derek Whitmore started showing up everywhere. Not aggressively, strategically. Bradley noticed because pattern recognition was half his profession. Saturday morning baseball practice at Whetstone Park. Derek appeared carrying Starbucks cups and wearing an expensive navy quarter-zip sweater that still had fold lines near the shoulders. New clothes, recently purchased. He greeted the other parents too loudly. "Morning, everybody?" Most of them nodded politely before returning to their folding chairs and coffee thermoses. Youth baseball in Columbus had its own rhythm. Quiet parents, cold mornings, lawn chairs sinking slightly into wet grass. Bradley stood near the dugout helping Mason tighten his batting gloves. Derek approached with casual confidence. "Brought vanilla sweet cream cold brew," he said. "Vanessa said you drink coffee black." Bradley looked at the cup, then at Derek. "Thanks." He took it. No hostility. That seemed to disappoint Derek slightly, because men like Derek prepared themselves for visible resistance. Calm acceptance gave them nowhere to place the performance. Mason ran toward the field after Coach Ramirez blew the whistle. Derek folded his arms. "Good program here," he said. "Kids seem disciplined." Bradley watched Mason join the warm-up line. "Coach keeps structure tight." "I respect that." Bradley nodded once. Silence stretched between them again. Derek broke it first. "You know Vanessa talks about you like you're impossible to read?" Bradley sipped the coffee. "Too sweet." "She talks about me a lot." Derek smiled carefully. Co-parenting situation, normal stuff. Bradley didn't answer, because he already knew something Derek didn't. People revealed themselves faster when they tried filling silence. Sure enough, Derek kept talking. "I think the kids are adjusting pretty well." Adjusting. Interesting word choice. As if replacement had already become part of the long-term plan. "They're good kids," Bradley answered calmly. Ava sat nearby on the bleachers, pretending to read while secretly listening. Bradley noticed that too. Children listened hardest when adults thought they weren't paying attention. The practice lasted 90 minutes. During drills, Derek clapped too hard after every hit Mason made, too eager, too performative. One of the fathers beside Bradley finally muttered quietly, "Guy acts like he's running for office." Bradley almost smiled. After practice, Mason climbed into Bradley's truck carrying his helmet under one arm. "Derek says he played college baseball." "Did he?" "Yeah, but he doesn't throw right." Bradley started the engine. "How do you know Coach Ramirez said Derek grips the ball weird?" "Small detail, stored automatically." That evening, Bradley sat at his kitchen table reviewing updated verification reports from Meridian Atlas, while Ava finished homework nearby. The house smelled faintly like tomato soup and garlic bread. Normal, quiet, safe. His laptop screen displayed 3 open files. Candidate verification escalation, reference failure notice, employment discrepancy review. Evelyn had moved Derek's review into deeper analysis territory now. Not full investigation, not yet, but close. Bradley read another flagged inconsistency. Derek claimed responsibility for a Midwest infrastructure transition project valued at $38 million. Meridian's analysts could not confirm he held authority over the project at all. Possible exaggeration, possible fabrication. Bradley leaned back slowly. "Ava." She looked up from her algebra worksheet. "Yeah, what do you think about Derek?" Her pencil stopped moving immediately. Children answered honestly when adults asked calmly. "I think he tries too hard." Bradley waited. "He acts different around Mom than around other people." How Ava shrugged, like he's selling something. The answer stayed with Bradley, because it matched exactly what his instincts had already concluded. Later that night, Vanessa called again, this time irritated. "You could make more effort." Bradley continued reviewing documents while holding the phone against his shoulder. "With what?" "With Derek." He seems fine. Don't do that. Bradley finally paused typing. Do what act like you're above everything. Interesting accusation, especially considering Bradley had never insulted Derek once. I'm not above anything, Vanessa. You're judging him. No, Bradley answered evenly. I'm observing him. Silence. Then Vanessa changed direction again. We're taking the kids to COSI tomorrow. You already mentioned that. Well, Derek's buying them annual memberships. Bradley looked toward the living room, where Mason had fallen asleep halfway through a cartoon. That's generous. Vanessa sounded frustrated again by the lack of emotional reaction. You don't care. I care whether the kids are safe and happy. Another silence. Sharp this time. Then the call ended. At Meridian Atlas Monday morning, Bradley found Evelyn waiting outside his office with a printed folder already in hand. That was fast, Bradley said, because our candidate is sloppy. She entered behind him and closed the door. Evelyn spread several documents across the desk. His North Point title inflation is confirmed. Bradley scanned the paperwork, by how much he managed a regional support team of 9 people, and the resume claims executive strategic oversight across 4 states. Bradley exhaled quietly through his nose. Classic expansion language, technically difficult to prosecute, still dishonest. Evelyn pointed to another section. Also found 2 references tied to disconnected burner numbers. Bradley's eyes narrowed slightly. Intentional looks that way. Any criminal exposure, nothing direct yet. Yet. That word mattered. Bradley reviewed every page carefully. Outside his office glass wall, level 27 moved with its usual controlled intensity. Analysts crossed corridors, carrying encrypted files. Executive assistants coordinated secure conference calls. Somewhere downstairs, millions of dollars in logistics decisions move through Meridian systems every hour, and Derek Whitmore wanted access to all of it. Bradley tapped one document once. Continue level 2. Evelyn studied him carefully. You think there's more? Bradley looked down at the resume again. Men who lied confidently in visible places usually lied worse, in hidden places. Yes, he answered quietly. At 3:40 p.m., another email arrived from Vanessa. Subject: kids' dinner. Thursday, Bradley opened it. Vanessa wanted Derek included again. Family integration, healthy transition, consistency for the children. The language sounded suspiciously therapeutic, like something copied from an article or coached conversation. Bradley reread one sentence twice. Derek really wants to build trust with you. Trust? Interesting choice again. Bradley closed the email without responding immediately. Then another notification appeared seconds later. Internal security alert candidate access attempt. Bradley clicked it once. Derek Whitmore had attempted to access restricted executive employee profiles through Meridian's external applicant portal. Specifically, Bradley Gonzales' internal leadership page. Unauthorized, not technically illegal, but very stupid. Bradley stared at the screen silently. Because experienced executives understood boundaries during recruitment processes. Desperate men crossed them. 5 minutes later, Evelyn stepped into the doorway again. You saw it. Yes? He's nervous. Bradley closed the file slowly. No, he corrected quietly. He's scared. That evening, Bradley drove to Vanessa's subdivision to pick up the children. The neighborhood sat inside New Albany behind stone entry signs and decorative fountains. Vanessa loved appearances that suggested exclusivity. Derek's black Range Rover already sat in the driveway. As Bradley walked toward the front door, voices carried through the partially open garage. Vanessa laughing, Derek speaking lower. Then Mason's voice. I want to ride with Dad. A pause followed. Small, but uncomfortable. Bradley stepped into the garage entrance quietly. Derek turned immediately. And for the first time since the introductions began, Bradley saw something beneath the polished confidence. Not annoyance, not arrogance, calculation. The kind men used when they suddenly realized the quiet person in the room might actually be the most dangerous one there. The first real alarm came from Mason, not from Meridian Atlas, not from Vanessa, not from Derek himself. From an 8-year-old boy sitting barefoot at Bradley's kitchen counter on a rainy Thursday night, eating microwave popcorn out of a blue plastic bowl. Bradley was rinsing dishes when Mason spoke casually. Derek got mad again. Bradley shut off the water immediately. Not dramatic, not rushed, just attentive. What happened? Mason shrugged. We were leaving the BBQ place after Mom's work thing. Which place? Smoke River over by Dublin. Bradley dried his hands slowly with a dish towel. What happened there? Mason tossed another piece of popcorn into his mouth. A truck cut us off and Derek started yelling real loud, yelling at the driver. Yeah, then he drove super fast. A quiet feeling settled into Bradley's chest. Not panic, calculation. How fast, I don't know. Mason shrugged again. Fast enough Mom grabbed the handle thing. Bradley leaned lightly against the counter. Did Derek drink anything? Mason nodded instantly. He had 2 beers, maybe 3. Ava looked up from the couch immediately. It was more than that. Bradley turned toward her. Ava hesitated before continuing. He had whiskey too, at the restaurant part. Bradley stayed completely still. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the background. Details mattered, especially when they came from children who didn't understand legal implications yet. What happened after he got angry? Bradley asked calmly. Ava exchanged a glance with Mason first. Then she answered carefully. He grabbed Mason's shoulder really hard because Mason told him to slow down. Mason rubbed his left shoulder unconsciously while listening. Bradley noticed. What do you mean hard? Mason demonstrated awkwardly against himself like this. Bradley's jaw tightened slightly, barely visible. Did it leave a mark? No. Did it scare you? Mason looked down at the popcorn bowl. A little. That answer mattered more than bruises. Bradley crouched slightly so he was eye level with both children. You did the right thing telling me. Neither child spoke. Then Ava quietly asked the question Bradley knew had been forming for weeks. Are you going to fight with Mom now? Bradley shook his head once. No, because Bradley understood something Vanessa still didn't. The loudest person in a conflict rarely controlled the outcome. Later that night, after the children went upstairs, Bradley sat alone at the kitchen table with his laptop open beside a yellow legal pad. 10:42 p.m. Rain continued outside. He wrote carefully, date, location, children's statements, possible alcohol consumption, driving behavior, physical contact description. No exaggeration, no emotional language, only facts. At 11:06 p.m., he called Naomi Price. She answered on the second ring. You don't call late unless something shifted. Bradley explained everything calmly from beginning to end. Naomi never interrupted. When he finished, she asked only one question. Any independent evidence? Not yet. Good answer. Bradley leaned back slightly in the chair. You expected me to say no. I expected you to say you confronted someone emotionally. I didn't. I know. That was why Naomi respected him. Family court punished emotional reactions almost as aggressively as bad behavior itself. Listen carefully, Naomi said. You're entering a different phase now. Bradley picked up a pen automatically. Document everything involving transportation, alcohol aggression, or emotional instability around the children. Already started. Good. No accusations to Vanessa yet. I wasn't planning to. Also good. Naomi paused briefly. People like Derek eventually expose themselves. The key is letting systems see it before emotions muddy it. Bradley stared through the dark kitchen toward the backyard fence he repaired every spring himself. I understand. The next morning before work, Bradley stopped at a security electronics store near Polaris Parkway. Not because he planned revenge, because he believed in records. An hour later, a compact dashboard archive camera sat mounted discreetly inside his truck. Continuous recording, automatic cloud upload, timestamp verification, nothing illegal, nothing invasive, just documentation. At Meridian Atlas, Derek Whitmore's file continued deteriorating. By Friday afternoon, Evelyn Cho entered Bradley's office carrying another sealed folder. "He's dirtier than I thought." Bradley motioned toward the chair across from his desk. "Show me." Evelyn spread documents across the table. 3 vendor contacts tied to Helix Corp refused to discuss him. Lawyer silence. Feels like it. Bradley reviewed a highlighted section. Expense reimbursement anomalies. Corporate card disputes. Unauthorized hospitality charges. Still circumstantial. Still not enough for formal disqualification. But the pattern was growing. Evelyn crossed her arms. "There's something else." Bradley looked up. "He's asking questions about you." That interested him immediately. With who recruiting staff, administrative personnel, even one of the junior security coordinators downstairs. What kind of questions? Why your name carries executive clearance tags while your internal profile lists compliance operations? Bradley almost smiled at that. Because now, Derek was making a mistake common to insecure men. Curiosity was overpowering discipline. What did they tell him? Nothing useful. Good. Evelyn studied him carefully for a moment. "You think he knows who you are now?" Bradley considered it honestly. "No," he answered. "I think he knows he underestimated me. There was a difference." Saturday arrived cold and gray. Vanessa hosted another social gathering at her New Albany house. Real estate agents, mortgage brokers, loud conversations about investment properties, and market forecasts. Bradley only came because it was his scheduled pickup night. He parked beside 6 luxury vehicles lining the curb. Inside the house, music drifted through the kitchen, while adults held wine glasses and talked too loudly. Vanessa spotted him immediately. "You're early. It's 6. You could have waited a few minutes." Bradley ignored the irritation in her voice and scanned the room instead. Derek stood near the island counter laughing with 2 men in tailored jackets. Then he noticed Bradley. The laughter stopped almost instantly. Again. That same flash behind the eyes. Recognition mixed with uncertainty. Derek walked over holding a whiskey tumbler. Bradley. Derek. Vanessa folded her arms immediately, already anticipating tension. But Bradley remained calm. Always calm. "How's work?" Derek asked casually. "Busy?" Heard Meridian Atlas is expanding. Bradley looked directly at him. People hear lots of things. For half a second, Derek lost rhythm. Tiny pause. Tiny crack. Then he recovered. Big company. Hard to get into. Usually. Vanessa jumped in quickly. "Derek's probably interviewing again soon." Bradley nodded. "Once." "I know." The sentence landed harder than Vanessa realized. Derek noticed immediately. Bradley could see it in the slight tightening near his mouth. "How would you know that?" Vanessa asked. Bradley looked at her calmly. "Columbus is smaller than people think." True statement, not full statement. Ava appeared beside Bradley holding her overnight bag. "I'm ready." Mason followed behind her carrying a half-finished soda. As the children moved toward the door, Bradley noticed Derek place a hand on Mason's shoulder again. Too firm, too possessive. Mason subtly leaned away from it. Another detail stored. Outside, cold wind swept through the neighborhood streets. The children climbed into the truck while Bradley secured their bags in the back seat. Just before he closed the driver's door, Ava spoke quietly from the passenger seat. "Dad." "Yeah." She hesitated. "Then I think Derek acts nice when Mom's looking." Bradley looked at her carefully. Streetlights reflected softly across the windshield. "What makes you say that?" Ava stared forward. because his face changes when she leaves the room. The sentence stayed with Bradley the entire drive home. Because children noticed masks long before adults admitted they existed. And deep down, Bradley was beginning to suspect Derek Whitmore's mask covered something far worse than simple arrogance. Then his phone vibrated at a red light. Internal Meridian Atlas notification. Priority escalation. Bradley opened the message. Candidate Whitmore attempted unauthorized contact with former Helix Corps personnel connected to sealed internal review. Bradley read the alert twice, then slowly tightened one hand around the steering wheel, because desperate people only did that when they believed exposure was getting close. Vanessa's email arrived Monday morning at 5:48 a.m. Bradley saw it while standing alone in his kitchen, waiting for coffee to brew. Subject, line, custody schedule, reassessment, not emotional, not angry. Worse, carefully written. Bradley opened the message and read it once without reacting, then again, more slowly. Vanessa claimed the children had become emotionally withdrawn during transitions between households. She suggested Bradley created an environment lacking emotional warmth and engagement. She also requested a discussion regarding adjustments to primary placement for long-term developmental consistency. The language wasn't hers. Too clinical, too strategic. Someone had coached her. Bradley poured coffee into his black travel mug and continued reading. Near the end of the email, one sentence stood out sharply. Derek has experience helping families navigate emotionally difficult transitions. Bradley stared at that line for several seconds, not because it hurt, because it revealed intent. People accidentally exposed themselves when they tried sounding intelligent. At 6:21 a.m., Bradley forwarded the email directly to Naomi Price. 2 minutes later, his phone rang. Naomi didn't waste time with greetings. How long has this guy been around the children? 6 weeks. Too fast. Bradley sat at the kitchen table. I thought so. You were right not to react emotionally. I haven't responded yet. Good. Naomi paused briefly while reading the email herself. This wasn't written by Vanessa alone. Bradley looked out through the kitchen window toward the wet Maple Ridge street. No. You know what bothers me most? Naomi asked. Bradley waited. The phrase developmental consistency. That's family court language. Somebody's researching strategy. Bradley's jaw tightened slightly, very slightly. She mentioned Derek helping with transitions. Naomi exhaled softly, which means Derek's involving himself in parenting structure discussions already. The sentence sat cold in Bradley's chest, not because he feared losing control, because the children were becoming part of someone else's positioning strategy. What's the move? Bradley asked. The move, Naomi answered calmly, is patience. Bradley almost smiled at that. Most people mistook patience for weakness because they didn't understand how much discipline it required. Continue documenting everything, Naomi continued. No emotional replies, no accusations. Let them overplay their hand. After the call ended, Bradley typed exactly 4 sentences back to Vanessa. Professional, neutral. He agreed to discuss scheduling concerns through proper co-parenting channels and requested specific examples regarding her concerns about the children's emotional well-being. No anger, no defensiveness, because Bradley understood something important. The calmer person usually appeared more credible once systems became involved. At Meridian Atlas, Derek Whitmore's file kept deteriorating. By Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn entered Bradley's office carrying another escalation report. He's getting nervous. Bradley looked up from a compliance review. How obvious he contacted recruiting again, asking why the process is delayed. That happens. He also asked whether risk integrity reviews are influenced by personal conflicts. Bradley leaned back slowly. There it was, testing boundaries, fishing for information. What did recruiting say That all executive candidates undergo standardized review? Good. Evelyn handed him another document. Financial verification flagged something else. Bradley opened the file. 3 wire transfers, large amounts. Irregular routing between consulting accounts tied to a vendor group connected with Helix Core. Not illegal on the surface, but structured strangely, like someone trying to make transactions appear ordinary. Bradley read silently for nearly 30 seconds. Outside the office window, snow drifted lightly across downtown Columbus. Level 27 remained quiet except for distant keyboards and muted conference calls. Finally, Bradley spoke. "Expand Forensic Review Authority." Evelyn nodded immediately. "You think he buried something financial?" "I think people who lie about titles usually lie about money, too." That afternoon, Vanessa posted another story online. A rooftop restaurant, wine glasses, Derek smiling beside her. Caption, "Some people grow, some people stay comfortable forever." Bradley saw it because Ava accidentally opened the story while using Vanessa's iPad during homework. "She does this stuff all the time now," Ava muttered quietly. Bradley took the tablet gently and closed the app. "What matters is how she treats you, not captions." Ava stared down at her math worksheet. She's different around Derek. How she acts like she's trying to impress him. Bradley said nothing, because Ava was old enough now to notice performance. That night during dinner, Mason casually mentioned something else. "Derek got mad at Mom yesterday." Bradley looked up immediately. What happened? He thought she looked at her phone too much. Ava corrected him quietly. "No, he got mad because she interrupted him while he was talking." Bradley kept his voice calm. "Did he yell a little?" Mason admitted. Ava pushed peas around her plate with a fork. "He gets really nice again right after." Bradley's eyes narrowed slightly. Pattern. Temper. Followed by immediate charm recovery. Classic instability masking. "Did he apologize?" "Yeah," Ava answered. "But like, fake." Children noticed authenticity faster than adults ruined by appearances. Later that evening, Bradley reviewed dashboard camera footage from the previous weekend while organizing files for Naomi. The camera showed routine driving footage first. Traffic lights, gas stations, school pickup lines. Then the timestamp from Saturday appeared. Vanessa's driveway. Derek standing beside Mason. Bradley slowed the playback. Derek smiled while talking. Then Vanessa turned toward the house, and Derek's face changed instantly. Subtle, but visible. Smile, gone. Jaw tightened. Hand gripping Mason's shoulder too firmly while steering him toward the garage. Mason leaning slightly away. Bradley replayed the footage twice. Not enough for court, yet, but enough to confirm instinct. At 9:17 p.m., another email arrived from Vanessa. This one shorter. "You always make everything feel cold and transactional." Bradley stared at the sentence, then closed the laptop entirely, because that accusation had followed him most of his adult life. Cold, transactional, detached. People said those things about men who controlled emotions instead of displaying them publicly. But Bradley knew something Vanessa never fully understood. Children felt safest around predictability, not performance. The next morning, Derek finally made a direct mistake. A junior compliance analyst named Trevor accidentally forwarded Bradley an internal message flag for review. External Candidate Inquiry, Derek Whitmore. The message contained a question Derek had submitted through a recruiting contact. "Is Bradley Gonzales involved in final recommendation authority for my candidacy?" Bradley read the sentence once, then again, slowly, because now Derek knew enough to be afraid. And afraid people rushed. At 11:42 a.m., Bradley received another call from Naomi. "I reviewed Vanessa's language patterns against prior emails." Bradley closed his office door before answering. "And she's escalating." How far? Far enough that I want proactive preparation. Bradley sat down. Naomi's tone almost never shifted unless she saw structural danger approaching. I'm listening. I want every documented interaction involving Derek organized chronologically. Already working on it. Good. Also preserve all social media posts. Bradley opened a folder on his desktop immediately. Done. Naomi continued. If this turns into custody modification territory, the court will care about consistency, emotional regulation, and safety indicators. Bradley looked through the glass wall toward the executive conference rooms beyond the corridor. What's your read? A brief silence followed. Then Naomi answered carefully. My read is that Derek thinks confidence can overpower systems. Bradley almost smiled again, because that was exactly what Meridian Atlas specialized in exposing. Naomi lowered her voice slightly. And my second read is that Vanessa still doesn't understand who she dragged into her children's lives. After work, Bradley drove to Brookstone Elementary for Ava's debate club pickup. Parents stood near the sidewalk in winter coats, while children spilled through the front entrance carrying backpacks and poster boards. Bradley spotted Ava immediately, but someone else stood near the school fence too. Derek, hands in coat pockets, watching the parking lot, watching Bradley. The moment their eyes met, Derek smiled. But it arrived half a second too late to look natural, and Bradley recognized that expression instantly. A man calculating pressure. A man deciding whether intimidation might work better than charm. The deeper Meridian Atlas dug into Derek Whitmore's history, the quieter Bradley became. That was usually how his mind worked under pressure. Not louder, sharper. 3 floors beneath Bradley's office, the Corporate Forensic Review Division occupied a secured wing without exterior signage. No windows, restricted badge access, frosted glass walls. Most Meridian employees never saw it, which was intentional. At 7:15 Tuesday morning, Bradley walked through the security corridor carrying a thin black folder under one arm. Inside conference room, see Evelyn Cho already sat beside 2 forensic analysts reviewing transaction charts projected across a screen. Colored lines connected vendor accounts like tangled wiring, Morning, Evelyn said. Bradley nodded once and took the seat nearest the wall. Analyst Marcus Hale rotated the monitor toward him. We confirmed irregular payment routing tied to Whitmore's Helix core period. How irregular? Marcus tapped several highlighted entries. Consulting reimbursements redirected through secondary vendor intermediaries. Bradley studied the screen silently. Money laundering. Marcus shook his head. No evidence of criminal structuring yet, but definitely concealment behavior. Another analyst, Priya Raman, slid a printed document across the table. Here's the important part. Bradley read carefully. 2 vendors connected to Derek's project oversight had later been removed from Helix Core procurement networks after internal ethics complaints. One of the complaints referenced relationship-based pressure tactics. Bradley looked up slowly. Any direct accusation against Whitmore? None documented publicly, Priya answered. But someone worked very hard to keep his name out of formal records. That interested Bradley more than a direct accusation would have, because clean removals usually meant legal settlements or protected executives. Neither possibility helped Derek. Evelyn folded her arms. There's something else. Bradley waited. He lied about educational credentials. The room became quieter somehow after that. Not dramatic, just colder. Marcus handed over another file. Claims partial executive coursework completion through Northwestern Kellogg. Bradley scanned the verification response. No record found, small lie, but deliberate. And Bradley knew something important about high-level executive reviews. Tiny lies destroyed trust faster than large mistakes. Because small lies proved habit. How far do we escalate? Evelyn asked. Bradley looked down at Derek's growing file. Inflated titles, false educational claims, vendor irregularities, reference manipulation, unauthorized candidate inquiries. Every piece alone looked survivable. Together they formed a pattern. Level 3. Bradley answered calmly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That'll trigger executive oversight. Yes, meaning Whitmore's effectively done here. Bradley closed the folder slowly. No, meaning the system gets full visibility before decisions are made. That distinction mattered to him, because Bradley refused to become the emotional ex-husband sabotaging a rival. Everything had to survive scrutiny cleanly. At 10:40 a.m., Bradley received another message from Vanessa, this time accompanied by 3 smiling photos from COSI. Derek helping Mason build a robotics model. Derek and Ava near a space exhibit. Vanessa leaning against Derek while all 4 smiled toward the camera. Caption beneath the photos. The kids really need positive masculine energy right now. Bradley stared at the sentence for several seconds. Not because it hurt, because it sounded scripted, weaponized. Ava texted separately 5 minutes later. Dad, can you still take me to debate regionals Friday? Bradley answered immediately. Of course. Another message arrived seconds later. Please don't tell Mom I asked you first. Bradley's expression hardened slightly. Children should never feel forced to manage adult emotions. That afternoon, Meridian's legal liaison requested a formal review meeting, which almost never happened this early during a recruitment. By 2 p.m., Bradley sat inside Executive Compliance Room 4 with General Counsel Rebecca Sloan and COO Martin Feldman. Rebecca adjusted her glasses while reviewing the file. This is extensive. Bradley remained still, documented, and verified. Martin leaned back heavily in his chair. How did recruiting miss all this performance bias? Bradley answered simply. Rebecca looked up. Meaning Whitmore interviews well. Confident candidates receive less skepticism initially. Martin frowned while scanning the resume again. He certainly talks like an executive. Bradley almost responded immediately. Instead, he waited. Then real executives usually talk more specifically. Rebecca's mouth twitched slightly at that. She understood exactly what he meant. Bradley continued calmly. People doing actual operational leadership discuss measurable outcomes. Whitmore discusses identity. Martin closed the file halfway. So what's your recommendation? Bradley answered without hesitation. Candidate presence escalating integrity concerns, incompatible with executive access clearance. Clean, objective, documented. Rebecca nodded slowly. Any personal exposure here we should know about? The question hung carefully in the room. Bradley met her eyes directly. He's dating my ex-wife. Martin sat up straighter immediately. Rebecca remained calm, and I disclosed that internally the moment overlap became apparent. You believe your review remained objective? Yes. Rebecca studied him for nearly 5 seconds, then nodded once. I agree, because Bradley had built the file too carefully for emotion to contaminate it. Every fact stood independently. After the meeting ended, Bradley walked back toward level 27 through the executive corridor. Halfway there, he saw Derek for the first time inside Meridian Atlas headquarters. The moment landed strangely quiet. Derek stood near the reception checkpoint wearing a charcoal overcoat and carrying a leather portfolio. Recruiting must have scheduled another preliminary discussion. Without realizing final review had already shifted toward legal escalation. Derek turned, saw Bradley, stopped walking instantly. Fear looked different up close, not dramatic, compressed, like someone mentally recalculating danger too quickly. Bradley continued forward calmly, no smirk, no intimidation. Derek attempted a smile anyway. Bradley. Derek. The receptionist behind the desk glanced between them awkwardly. Derek adjusted his grip on the portfolio. Didn't realize you worked in this building. Bradley looked at him evenly. You didn't ask. Derek forced a small laugh. Guess not. Silence followed. The elevator doors opened softly nearby. Neither man moved immediately. Then Derek lowered his voice slightly. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Bradley waited. "Are you involved in my review process?" The question came too fast, too directly. Bradley studied him quietly. "What answer would make you feel better?" Derek's jaw tightened. "There's a difference between professional review and personal conflict." "Correct." Another silence. Bradley noticed perspiration beginning near Derek's collar despite the cold weather outside. "Interesting. You know," Derek said carefully, "Vanessa told me you're very territorial." Bradley almost smiled again. Not because the insult worked, because Vanessa still misunderstood him completely. "This isn't territorial," Bradley answered calmly. "What is it?" "Pattern recognition." The elevator doors began closing. Bradley stepped inside first. Derek remained outside the threshold. And for the first time since this entire situation began, Derek looked openly uncertain, not confident, not charming, just uncertain. The elevator doors sealed between them. At 5:30 p.m., Bradley arrived at Brookstone Elementary to pick up Ava from debate practice. Snow drifted lightly across the parking lot now. Parents waited inside idling vehicles, with headlights glowing against the gray evening. Ava entered the truck quietly. "You okay?" Bradley asked. She buckled her seatbelt first, then nodded uncertainly. "Mom and Derek fought last night." Bradley kept his eyes on the windshield. "What about she said he's stressed all the time now?" Bradley started the engine slowly. Ava hesitated before speaking again. "I think he's scared of you." The sentence lingered heavily inside the truck. Bradley adjusted the heater vents. "Why would he be scared of me?" Ava stared out the side window at falling snow. "Because every time you're around, he stops acting confident." Bradley drove in silence for several blocks after that, because Ava had unknowingly summarized the entire situation perfectly. Men like Derek depended on controlling perception, and Bradley's calmness had quietly taken that control away from him piece by piece. Then Bradley's phone buzzed through the dashboard connection. Private Meridian alert. Level 3 escalation approved. Executive candidate Whitmore referred to legal risk evaluation. Bradley read the notification once, then looked back at the snowy road ahead, because now the system itself had started moving, and systems moved much slower than emotions, but they hit much harder. Brookstone Elementary dismissed students at 3:15 every afternoon. By 3:05, the pickup line already stretched halfway around the block. SUV engines idled beneath bare winter trees, while exhausted parents scrolled through phones or drank coffee from paper cups. Teachers in reflective vests guided children toward waiting vehicles through patches of old gray snow. Bradley arrived early, always early. His Ford F-150 sat 3 cars back from the crosswalk, while soft heat pushed through the vents. Ava finished homework quietly in the passenger seat beside him, earbuds dangling around her neck. "You nervous about regionals tomorrow?" Bradley asked. "A little? You'll do fine." Ava glanced sideways at him. "You always say that." "Because it's usually true." That earned the smallest smile from her. Then Bradley noticed movement near the school entrance. Derek, standing alone beside the chain-link fence, hands in his coat pockets, watching the pickup lane. Bradley's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is Mom coming too?" he asked. Ava looked up immediately. "No." "Interesting." Derek spotted the truck a second later. Even from across the parking area, Bradley saw the shift happen in real time. Derek straightened too quickly, forced confidence returning like a jacket pulled over shaking shoulders. Ava saw it too. "He does that every time." "Does what?" "Acts different when he sees you." Bradley didn't answer, because he already knew. 3 minutes later, school doors opened, and Mason came sprinting outside carrying a paper snowflake craft nearly bigger than his chest. Bradley stepped out of the truck to help him. Cold wind swept through the parking lot carrying the smell of wet asphalt and distant traffic. Mason grinned immediately. Dad, look. That's impressive. It's for winter week. Bradley folded the paper carefully to keep it from tearing. Then Derek walked over. Not casual this time. Direct. The closer he got, the more Bradley noticed signs of stress. Tight jaw, slight redness beneath the eyes, forced breathing control. Derek stopped beside the truck. We should talk. Bradley opened the rear door for Mason first. Kids in the truck. Derek glanced toward them impatiently. It'll take a second. Bradley looked at Ava. Doors locked. She nodded immediately. Then Bradley closed the rear door and turned fully toward Derek for the first time. The school parking lot buzzed quietly around them. Parents loading backpacks. Teachers waving goodbye. Crossing guards blowing whistles. Public place. Witnesses everywhere. Smart choice by Derek, or so he probably thought. What's going on? Bradley asked calmly. Derek lowered his voice. You know exactly what's going on. Bradley remained silent, again forcing Derek to keep talking. My review process at Meridian suddenly escalates right after you figure out who I am. Bradley studied him carefully. You applied to a risk-sensitive executive role. That's not an answer. It's the correct answer. Derek stepped closer. Too close. Bradley noticed the faint smell of whiskey hidden beneath expensive cologne. Day drinking. Interesting. You're using your position personally. No. Yes, you are. Bradley's expression never changed. Everything in your file came from documented verification. Derek's face tightened immediately at the word documented. Another tell. People hated records when records exposed them. You think you're smarter than everybody? Derek muttered. Bradley almost responded. Instead, he watched Derek carefully, because anger revealed structure faster than calm conversation. And Derek was close now. Very close. What exactly did Vanessa tell you about me? Derek asked. Not much. That's hard to believe. Why? Because suddenly I'm being treated like a criminal. Bradley tilted his head slightly. Are you? That landed harder than shouting would have. Derek's composure slipped visibly. For half a second, something ugly surfaced beneath the polished executive act. Listen carefully, Derek said quietly. You don't get to sabotage my future because you can't move on from your marriage. There it was. Projection. Bradley folded his hands calmly inside his coat pockets. This conversation should end. No, Derek snapped. This conversation ends when you stop hiding behind corporate procedures. Across the parking lot, a teacher glanced toward them briefly. Bradley noticed. So did Derek. But Derek kept going. You know what Vanessa says about you, he continued. She says you've always been emotionally dead. Bradley remained perfectly still, which somehow frustrated Derek even more. She says the kids barely react when they leave your house. Bradley's eyes sharpened slightly, because now Derek was involving the children directly. Dangerous mistake. Be careful, Bradley said quietly. Derek laughed once, cold, sharp. Oh, now you care. Bradley's voice stayed even. You shouldn't discuss private co-parenting conversations in school parking lots. For the first time, Derek hesitated. Small pause. Then he made the mistake Bradley would remember later, almost word for word. She wants full custody eventually anyway. The sentence hung in cold air between them. Bradley looked at him steadily. She told you that Derek realized too late what he had revealed. You know what I mean. No, Bradley answered calmly. I'd like you to explain it clearly. Derek's breathing grew heavier. She's tired of pretending the kids are okay with you. Interesting. What's interesting? You said she wants full custody. Derek's jaw flexed. You're twisting words. Bradley glanced once toward the school entrance. Mounted security cameras above the awning pointed directly toward the pickup lane. Visible. Recording. Another detail stored instantly. You approach me, Bradley said quietly. Not the other way around. Derek stepped closer again, close enough now that Bradley could see sweat beginning near his hairline, despite the freezing air. You think your job protects you? No. Then what? Bradley looked directly into his eyes. The truth usually does. That answer broke something, not dramatically, but enough. Derek suddenly lost control of his volume. You don't know anything about me. Parents nearby turned subtly now, attention shifting. Exactly the kind of public emotional instability Bradley had expected eventually. Then stop behaving like someone hiding things, Bradley answered evenly. Derek pointed toward the truck. You're poisoning those kids against Vanessa. Bradley said nothing, and silence forced Derek to keep spiraling. You act calm because you think it makes you look superior. Still silence. And honestly, Derek snapped, people like you are dangerous because you hide behind this fake self-control crap. A car door slammed nearby. A teacher looked over again. Derek noticed too late. Bradley finally spoke. This conversation is over. Then he turned toward the truck. Derek grabbed his arm, not violently, but firmly enough. Big mistake. Inside the truck, Ava saw it immediately. So did the crossing guard 30 feet away. Bradley slowly looked down at Derek's hand. No anger, no fear, just observation. Derek released him instantly. For 1 second, genuine panic crossed his face because he understood exactly what had just happened. Public contact, witnesses, school property. Bradley opened the truck door calmly. Seatbelts, he told the kids. Neither child spoke. As he climbed into the driver's seat, Ava looked pale. You okay? Bradley asked softly. She nodded once, but Mason whispered from the back seat, I don't like him anymore. Bradley started the engine. Outside, Derek remained standing alone near the curb, watching the truck pull away. Smaller now somehow, less polished. Like the performance had started cracking in places he couldn't repair fast enough. Halfway home, Bradley's dashboard camera chimed softly. Cloud upload completed. Parking lot interaction archived successfully. Bradley kept driving, one hand steady on the wheel. Snow drifted lightly across the windshield. Then Ava spoke quietly beside him. I heard him talking to Mom last night. Bradley glanced toward her briefly, about what Ava swallowed. He said if you looked unstable in court, everything would get easier. The truck became very quiet after that, because Bradley finally understood something important. This was no longer just about Derek trying to secure an executive position at Meridian Atlas. And it was no longer only about Vanessa trying to prove she had upgraded her life after divorce. They were building a narrative, one designed to slowly push Bradley out of his children's lives, using appearances, pressure, and emotional manipulation. Bradley tightened his grip on the steering wheel once, just once. Then his phone vibrated through Bluetooth connection. Naomi Price. Bradley answered immediately. You're on speaker, he said calmly. Naomi's voice came through sharp and direct. Brookstone Elementary just called me. Bradley's eyes narrowed. How the school resource officer recognized my contact information from prior custody paperwork. A pause. Then Naomi asked quietly what exactly happened in that parking lot. Meridian Atlas scheduled Derek Whitmore's final executive review for Thursday at 9 a.m., Level 31, Executive Strategy Division. By then, the company already knew enough to reject him quietly. But Meridian's internal policies required one final procedural step before permanent disqualification from future leadership consideration. Verification confrontation, a controlled environment where inconsistencies were presented directly to the candidate. Most people corrected minor errors there. Derek Whitmore walked into the building believing he could still talk his way through it. That was his first mistake. The second was underestimating how carefully Meridian Atlas documented everything. At 7:40 a.m., Bradley stood alone beside the coffee station outside Executive Review Room B, reading overnight legal summaries. Dark charcoal suit, silver watch, no tie. The executive floor moved quietly around him. Frosted glass conference rooms glowed with presentation screens and compliance reports. Somewhere farther down the corridor, an assistant coordinated encrypted conference calls with federal contractors. Bradley looked exactly like he always did, controlled, ordinary at first glance, but people moved differently around him here, more careful, more respectful. At 8:03 a.m., Martin Feldman approached carrying a tablet under one arm. "You ready for this?" Bradley closed the report folder. "Yes." Martin studied him carefully. "You sure you want to stay involved? Policy allows it." "That's not what I asked." Bradley understood the difference immediately. Martin wasn't talking about ethics anymore. He was talking about emotion. Bradley looked through the glass wall toward downtown Columbus below. Snow clouds pressed low across the skyline. "I'm not interested in revenge," Bradley answered calmly. "I'm interested in accuracy." Martin nodded slowly. That was why Meridian trusted Bradley with the executive clearance reviews in the first place. Most people eventually personalized authority. Bradley never did. At 8:31 a.m., Evelyn entered carrying the finalized Level 3 report. 312 pages, structured, cross-referenced, verified. She placed it carefully on the conference table. "He's already downstairs." Bradley opened the first section silently. False credential representation, vendor ethics linkage, title inflation, unauthorized candidate inquiry conduct, potential concealment behavior. Every section included timestamp sourcing records and independent verification references. No speculation, only evidence. Evelyn lowered her voice slightly. "He looks rough." Bradley glanced up. "How rough? Nervous enough to ask the receptionist whether you'd be attending? Interesting? Not whether recruiting would attend, not whether legal would attend." Bradley. Fear had narrowed Derek's focus completely now. At 8:58 a.m., the conference room doors opened. Derek Whitmore entered wearing a navy suit and a confidence level that looked assembled minutes earlier in a parking garage mirror. The moment he saw Bradley seated behind the glass partition inside the adjoining executive review room, something in his posture changed. Tiny shift, shoulders tightening, breathing slowing intentionally. He tried smiling anyway. "Bradley." Bradley nodded once, no smile back. Recruiting Director Allison Pierce motioned toward the chair. "Please sit, Mr. Whitmore." The room itself was designed intentionally neutral. Gray walls, walnut conference table, minimal artwork, no distractions. Because Meridian believed uncomfortable conversations required nowhere to hide. Derek sat, placed his leather portfolio carefully on the table, crossed one leg over the other, performance returning. Allison opened the meeting formally. "Today's review concerns discrepancies discovered during executive verification procedures." Derek leaned back slightly. "I assumed something like this was coming." Bradley observed quietly through the glass. Interesting choice of words, not surprise, preparation, legal counsel. Rebecca Sloan entered next carrying an additional file. "We'll proceed one section at a time," she said calmly. Derek nodded. Of course. The first 30 minutes stayed controlled, mostly. Employment timeline discrepancies, inflated operational authority claims, credential inconsistencies. Derek answered smoothly at first. Administrative misunderstanding, resume formatting issue, third-party recruiter exaggeration. Every response sounded polished, practiced, but Bradley noticed something important. Derek never answered directly the first time. He circled questions, adjusted language, bought seconds, classic deception behavior. At 9:42 a.m., Rebecca presented the Northwestern verification response. "No record exists of your executive coursework participation." Derek immediately smiled. "That's because It was an unfinished leadership extension track. Rebecca slid another paper forward. We contacted Extension Administration directly. The smile weakened slightly. Derek uncrossed his legs. Then records may have been archived incorrectly. Bradley wrote one sentence quietly inside his notebook. Avoids fixed statements under pressure. At 10:06 a.m., things shifted harder. Marcus Hale entered remotely through secured conference video. The vendor reimbursement charts appeared across the wall screen. Colored transaction lines filled the room. Derek's breathing changed immediately. Bradley noticed before anyone else did. Marcus spoke calmly. These payments originated through Helix Core vendor structures connected to your operational oversight period. Derek leaned forward aggressively. I had no authority over vendor approval routing. Your signature appears here, Marcus answered. Screen zoom, digital authorization. Derek froze for half a second, only half, but enough. Then came the first visible crack. That authorization process involved multiple people. Rebecca folded her hands. Which people specifically? Derek hesitated. Longer this time. Too long. Bradley watched him carefully through the glass. Fear looked different now, less controlled, more physical. Sweat near the collar, jaw tension, eyes moving too quickly between speakers. Because the room had stopped functioning like a conversation. Now it was evidence. At 10:27 a.m., Allison shifted toward behavioral concerns. Mr. Whitmore, can you explain why you attempted unauthorized inquiries into risk integrity personnel involved in your review? Derek's eyes moved instantly toward Bradley through the glass partition. There it was again. Target fixation. You mean Bradley? Allison remained neutral. I mean internal personnel. Derek laughed once. Short, sharp. Come on, we all know what this really is. No one answered immediately, and silence made emotional people reckless. Derek leaned back harder. This process stopped being objective the second my personal life crossed paths with his. Rebecca spoke calmly. Are you alleging procedural misconduct? Derek looked directly through the glass at Bradley. Yes. The room became very still. Bradley finally spoke for the first time all morning. Not loudly, not emotionally, just clearly through the intercom system. Please identify one fact in your file that is inaccurate. Derek turned fully toward the glass. His confidence cracked visibly now. That's not the point. It is exactly the point. Another silence. Bradley continued calmly. Every document presented today was independently verified by departments outside my authority chain. Derek's breathing quickened. You manipulated timing? No. You poisoned perception? No. You wanted leverage because of Vanessa. Bradley's expression never changed. This review existed before I knew you were involved with her. True, documented, time-stamped. Rebecca slid another sheet onto the table. Mr. Whitmore, did you or did you not contact former Helix Core personnel after becoming aware of this investigation? Derek stared at the paper, then at Rebecca, then at Bradley, and finally something dangerous surfaced beneath the executive mask. Anger. Real anger. You know what he snapped. This company deserves people willing to fight for themselves. Allison answered immediately. This company requires people who don't lie during clearance review. That hit hard. Derek stood suddenly, chair scraping sharply against hardwood flooring. Outside the conference room, glass walls nearby assistants looked up immediately. This is ridiculous, Derek said loudly. You're all acting like I committed crimes. No one said that, Rebecca replied calmly. But you're treating me like a criminal. Bradley spoke once more, through the intercom. People usually feel safest with the truth. Wrong sentence for the moment. Because Derek lost composure completely after that. You think you're better than everybody because you sit quietly judging people. The volume echoed through the conference room. Security personnel outside the corridor shifted subtly. Trained, prepared. Bradley remained seated, still calm, which only made Derek appear more unstable by comparison. You hide behind systems because nobody would respect you. Otherwise, Derek continued, no response, again forcing Derek to keep escalating alone. You know what Vanessa says about you, Rebecca interrupted immediately. This meeting is over. But Derek kept talking. She says your own kids barely react when they see you. That sentence changed the room. Not emotionally for Bradley, structurally. Because now Derek had openly referenced private family conversations during the executive review proceedings. Another documented judgment failure. Security stepped inside quietly, not touching him yet, just present. Derek finally realized how far he had gone. Too late. Much too late. Rebecca closed the file completely. Meridian Atlas is terminating your candidacy effective immediately. Silence. Then the final blow. You are also being permanently flagged from future executive consideration. Derek looked toward Bradley one last time. And this time, there was no confidence left, only panic. Because for the first time since this entire situation began, Derek Whitmore understood something clearly. The quiet man he dismissed as ordinary had never fought emotionally because he never needed to. The system itself had done it for him. Vanessa called Bradley 14 times the night Derek lost the Meridian Atlas position. Bradley answered none of them. Not because he wanted revenge, because emotionally charged conversations created bad records. And Bradley had spent too many years learning the value of clean timelines. At 11:43 p.m., the first long message arrived, then another, then 6 more. Bradley sat alone at his kitchen table while snow pressed softly against the windows outside Maple Ridge. Ava and Mason were already asleep upstairs. The house remained quiet except for the ticking wall clock above the refrigerator. He opened the messages one at a time. Vanessa's tone moved through stages quickly. Confusion, anger, accusation, panic. You humiliated him on purpose. You used your position against us. You couldn't stand seeing me happy. Bradley read every message without responding. Then one arrived that made him stop scrolling. Derek says you manipulated internal reviews because you're obsessed with control. Bradley leaned back slowly in his chair. Interesting, because that sentence revealed coordination, not suspicion. Coordination. He forwarded the messages directly to Naomi Price without commentary. 3 minutes later, another text arrived from Vanessa. Do you know what this has done to his career? Bradley stared at the screen for several seconds, then set the phone face down beside his coffee mug. At 12:08 a.m., Naomi called. You were right, she said immediately. Bradley rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw. About their emotionally collapsing. Bradley remained quiet. Naomi continued, and collapsing people make mistakes. He opened Vanessa's messages again. She's escalating fast. She's terrified, Naomi corrected. Of what? That the narrative she built is falling apart. Bradley looked toward the dark hallway leading upstairs to the children's bedrooms. I don't care about the narrative. I know, Naomi answered. That's why you're dangerous to people like this. Bradley disliked that word. Dangerous. He had spent his entire adult life trying to remain controlled precisely to avoid becoming dangerous. Naomi's voice sharpened slightly. Listen carefully. Do not respond emotionally no matter what she sends. I won't. And preserve every message already archived. Good. The next text arrived while Naomi still spoke. Longer this time. Bradley opened it silently, and halfway through reading, his expression hardened for the first time all night. What exactly did you tell Meridian about Derek? He trusted me when he talked about internal concerns there. Bradley reread the sentence once, then again. Naomi immediately noticed the silence. What is it? Bradley spoke carefully. She just admitted Derek discussed confidential company matters with her. Naomi paused. Then send me screenshots immediately. Bradley did, within seconds. Because Vanessa still didn't understand how systems worked. She thought emotionally, impulsively. People like Bradley and Naomi thought structurally. And structurally, Vanessa had just created two separate problems at once: custody manipulation evidence and corporate confidentiality exposure. At 7:10 a.m. the following morning, Bradley arrived at Meridian Atlas carrying printed copies of every message. Snow covered downtown Columbus in thin gray slush. Employees moved carefully through the lobby carrying coffee cups and laptop bags, while security scanners hummed softly near the entrance checkpoints. Evelyn met him outside his office. "You look tired. Late night." She noticed the folder immediately. Related to Whitmore, Bradley handed her several printed pages. Evelyn read quickly, then slower, then looked up sharply. "She sent this voluntarily, yes. She's either panicking or reckless. Both." Evelyn pointed to one section. "Derek says you manipulated internal reviews because you're obsessed with control." "That line matters," she said quietly. Bradley nodded once. "Because it implies he discussed confidential review perceptions externally during active executive evaluation." "Exactly. Meridian Atlas treated information discipline seriously. Very seriously." Evelyn closed the folder carefully. "Legal's going to want copies. They already have them." At 9 a.m., Bradley sat inside Legal Review Conference Room 2 with Rebecca Sloan and two corporate ethics officers. The atmosphere felt colder than usual, not emotional, precise. Rebecca adjusted her glasses while reviewing Vanessa's screenshots. "This is unfortunate." Bradley remained still. "She's not employed by Meridian." "No," Rebecca agreed, but Whitmore was under confidentiality acknowledgement during active review. One ethics officer tapped the table lightly. He discussed internal processes with an outside party tied directly to a conflict variable. "Correct," Rebecca said. Bradley watched them work through the implications calmly, because this part no longer involved him personally. Now it belonged to systems, and systems move predictably. Rebecca finally looked toward him. "You understand legal may need written testimony regarding timeline overlap. I'll provide it. No personal commentary. You won't get any." That answer seemed to reassure everyone in the room slightly, because Bradley's credibility came from restraint. Always restraint. At 11:20 a.m., Vanessa finally appeared outside Meridian Atlas, unannounced. Bradley saw her through the lobby glass while exiting an elevator near the executive reception floor. Camel coat, dark sunglasses despite cloud cover, fast movements. Security intercepted her before she reached the upper elevators. Bradley almost kept walking. Then he noticed something else. Fear, real fear, not vanity panic, not embarrassment. Fear. He approached calmly while security stood nearby. Vanessa removed the sunglasses immediately. "What did you do?" Her voice shook slightly. Bradley kept his hands in his coat pockets. "I reviewed a candidate file." "That's not all you did." "Yes," Bradley answered evenly. "It is." Vanessa lowered her voice. "Derek says you destroyed his career." Bradley studied her carefully. "Derek destroyed his own candidacy." "No, he lied during the executive review." "You could have helped him." "Interesting." That sentence revealed more than she intended. Bradley's eyes narrowed slightly. "You expected special treatment?" Vanessa hesitated, only for a second, but long enough. "You knew he was trying to build something with us. Us." Again framing relationships like strategic partnerships. Bradley glanced briefly toward the security cameras overhead, always recording, always objective. "He discussed internal company matters with you." Vanessa froze instantly, and there it was. The exact moment she realized she had made another mistake. "I didn't." "You texted it directly." "That's not what I meant." Bradley remained calm, too calm, and Vanessa finally began understanding how terrifying calmness could become when paired with evidence. "You think you're winning something?" she whispered. Bradley's expression stayed neutral. "This isn't a game." Her composure cracked then, not publicly, quietly. "Do you know what he said after that interview?" she asked. Bradley said nothing. "He said you've spent years pretending to be smaller than you are, just so people underestimate you." That sentence lingered heavily between them, because it was partially true, not intentionally, but functionally. Bradley never corrected assumptions unless necessary. Vanessa looked exhausted suddenly, older somehow. "I didn't know you were all this," Bradley almost responded. Instead, he watched snow melt slowly along the lobby windows behind her. "You never asked," he said finally. Silence followed, long, painful. Then Vanessa spoke again. "He says you're trying to take the kids away." Bradley's eyes sharpened immediately. "I'm trying to protect them." From what Bradley looked directly at her. "Ask yourself why Ava doesn't trust him anymore." That hit harder than shouting would have, because Vanessa already knew the answer. Deep down, she just didn't want to examine it yet. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand. Derek. Bradley saw the name appear briefly across the screen. Vanessa declined the call instantly. Another detail stored. Then she whispered something that changed the entire direction of Bradley's thinking. "He wants me to push harder in court now." Bradley went completely still, not visibly, but internally, because now confirmation existed, not suspicion. Confirmation. Derek had become actively involved in custody strategy against him. Vanessa realized too late what she had revealed. Her face drained slightly. Bradley spoke carefully. "Did he tell you what to say about me?" "No. Too fast. Too defensive." Bradley simply nodded once, nothing more. And somehow that quiet acceptance frightened Vanessa more than accusations ever could, because she finally understood what Naomi Price already knew. Bradley Gonzales did not need emotional victories. He only needed the truth documented clearly enough for systems to recognize it. The emergency filing happened Friday morning at 8:12 a.m. in Franklin County Family Court. Naomi Price submitted it electronically from her downtown office, while freezing rain swept across Columbus streets outside. Temporary custody modification request. Grounds for review: escalating instability around the children. Documented aggressive behavior. Third-party interference in co-parenting structure. Potential emotional manipulation involving minors. Bradley read the final filing once from the chair across Naomi's desk. Clean. Precise. No dramatics. No exaggerated accusations, just timelines, evidence references, and documented concerns. Naomi closed the folder carefully. "This is the part where people usually get emotional," she said. Bradley looked through the office windows toward High Street traffic below. "I'm not emotional. I know." That was exactly why she trusted him. Naomi had spent 16 years watching custody cases destroy people. Most parents made the same mistake eventually. They wanted validation more than protection. Bradley only cared about the children remaining safe and stable. That difference mattered in court. Naomi slid another file toward him. "We also received Brookstone Elementary's security review." Bradley opened it immediately. 3 still-frame images sat clipped inside the report. Derek stepping aggressively closer in the parking lot. Derek grabbing Bradley's arm. Parents visibly turning toward the interaction. Time-stamped, verified. Naomi tapped the second image. "This matters. It wasn't violent." "No," she agreed calmly, "but it shows escalation behavior around the children during school pickup." Bradley nodded once. The hearing request moved faster than Vanessa expected. Because family courts reacted aggressively when school incidents entered documentation chains, especially when children witnessed them. By noon, Vanessa had already sent 8 more messages. This is insane. You're trying to destroy our lives. The kids don't need court trauma. Bradley answered only once. The filing concerns the children's safety and stability. Future communication should remain focused on scheduling and co-parenting logistics. Nothing else. No insults. No emotional language. Naomi approved the response immediately. Perfect, she said. At Meridian Atlas, the system continued moving separately. Corporate legal finalized Derek Whitmore's permanent disqualification file by early afternoon. His executive access profile received an internal flag preventing future candidacy reviews across all partner divisions. Not public, but permanent. Evelyn brought Bradley the confirmation memo at 2:30 p.m. It's done. Bradley skimmed the document once, then set it aside. Evelyn studied him carefully. You don't seem satisfied. Bradley leaned back in his chair. This was never about satisfaction then. What he looked toward the snow-covered skyline beyond the glass. Predictability. Evelyn understood immediately. Derek had become predictable, and predictable people eventually collapsed under pressure because they depended too heavily on performance. At 4:05 p.m., Bradley arrived at Maple Ridge Elementary for Mason's basketball practice. The gym smelled like rubber flooring and stale popcorn from last weekend's tournament. Parents sat scattered across bleachers wearing heavy coats, while children ran sloppy layup drills beneath fluorescent lights. Bradley sat quietly near the middle row. No laptop, no phone, just watching Mason play. Halfway through practice, Ava sat beside him carrying debate club papers against her chest. Mom's mad. Bradley kept watching the court. I know. She cried last night. That made him look at Ava finally. Children noticed everything after divorce, especially emotional weather shifts. You okay? Ava nodded uncertainly. She said you're trying to punish her. Bradley looked back toward the court where Mason missed another layup and groaned dramatically. I'm trying to keep both of you stable. Ava studied him carefully. You never yell. Interesting observation. Bradley rested his forearms against his knees. Yelling usually makes situations worse. Ava thought about that quietly. Then Derek yells when he's losing arguments. Bradley's expression sharpened slightly, not visibly to most people. But Ava noticed anyway. He yelled at Mom again yesterday, she admitted. What about he said she made him look weak? That sentence stayed with Bradley the rest of the evening, because weak men often confused exposure with betrayal. Later that night, Naomi called again. We received Vanessa's preliminary response. Bradley stood alone in his garage organizing tools while cold rain tapped against the roof. And she's claiming you're weaponizing professional influence. Bradley expected that. Any evidence attached numbered because there isn't any, correct. Naomi paused briefly. But there's something more interesting. Bradley waited. She attached Derek's written statement voluntarily. That caught his attention immediately. What does it say? Naomi exhaled quietly. He describes you as emotionally detached, intimidating through silence, and obsessed with maintaining control over perception. Bradley almost smiled, not because it was insulting, because it was psychologically revealing. What's funny? Naomi asked. He still thinks calmness is manipulation. Most unstable people do. Bradley closed the toolbox slowly. What's your read overall? Naomi answered without hesitation. My read is that Derek's becoming the center of this case instead of the children. And that was fatal in family court. Judges hated adults who turned custody matters into ego conflicts. Saturday morning brought another shift. Vanessa failed to arrive on time for scheduled child exchange, 20 minutes late, then 30. Bradley waited calmly inside the Maple Ridge grocery store parking lot while Ava read beside him, and Mason played handheld baseball games in the back seat. Finally, Vanessa's SUV arrived fast. Too fast. The vehicle parked crooked beside the truck. Bradley noticed immediately that Derek wasn't there. Interesting. Vanessa stepped out alone wearing oversized sunglasses despite cloudy weather. Her movements looked rushed, disorganized. First time Bradley had ever seen her appear publicly unprepared. "You're late," he said calmly. "I know. No argument?" Another unusual sign. Ava climbed out first, then stopped halfway toward Vanessa's SUV. "Where's Derek?" Vanessa hesitated. Tiny pause. "He's busy?" Children always recognize missing energy. Ava noticed it instantly. Mason did too. The ride exchange felt awkward and quiet beneath gray skies and blowing rain. Vanessa finally lowered her voice. "He hasn't been staying over." Bradley looked at her carefully, not surprised. Pressure fractures relationships built on appearances faster than relationships built on trust. "He blames me now," Vanessa admitted softly. Bradley said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say. Vanessa looked exhausted. "He said I should have defended him harder." Another revealing sentence. Bradley leaned lightly against the truck door. "You involved him too deeply in family matters." Vanessa flinched slightly at that, because deep down she knew it was true. Then her voice cracked unexpectedly. "Do you know how humiliating this has been?" Bradley studied her quietly. And for the first time in months, he saw something beyond vanity and defensiveness. Fear, real fear, not for reputation, for consequences. "The court hearing is in 9 days, Bradley said calmly. "Focus on the kids." Vanessa looked away immediately, because she knew the problem now. The children had started pulling emotionally toward Bradley on their own. Not because he manipulated them, because he remained steady while everything else became chaotic. That night, Bradley sat at the kitchen table helping Mason glue together a broken science project volcano. Ava worked nearby under soft lamplight. Ordinary evening, ordinary house, the kind of quiet stability people overlooked until it disappeared. Then Ava suddenly asked Dad, "Why didn't you fight back sooner?" Bradley looked at her carefully. Rain moved softly against the windows again, same rhythm as always. Because he answered quietly, "Truth works better when people reveal themselves first." Ava stared at him for several seconds after that, not fully understanding yet, but beginning to. Then Bradley's phone vibrated beside the glue sticks and science worksheets. Private message from Naomi Price. Court approved expedited review. Temporary custody modification hearing scheduled immediately. Bradley read the message once, then slowly set the phone back down beside Mason's half-finished volcano, because now the system itself was moving directly toward Vanessa and Derek, and systems never cared who cried loudest, only who documented the truth best. Franklin County Family Court sat under a dull winter sky that made the building look heavier than usual. Bradley arrived at 8:10 a.m., no tie, dark coat. Same calm expression he always wore when entering systems built to evaluate human behavior under pressure. Naomi was already inside the waiting area, reviewing printed binders stacked neatly on her lap. She looked up as he approached. Ready, Bradley nodded once. Inside the courtroom, Vanessa was already seated. Derek Whitmore sat beside her. But something was different now. The posture wasn't confident. It was controlled, carefully controlled, like someone trying not to fall apart in public. Vanessa avoided eye contact immediately. Derek didn't. He looked at Bradley longer than necessary, measuring, still trying to decide what Bradley actually was. The judge entered at 9 a.m. sharp, Judge Eleanor Hastings. Known for strict procedural discipline and low tolerance for emotional theatrics, exactly the kind of courtroom Naomi preferred. "Let's proceed," the judge said. The air in the room tightened instantly. Naomi stood first. "Your Honor, we are here requesting a temporary custody modification based on documented behavioral escalation third-party interference in co-parenting structure and school-related safety incidents involving the minor children. Bradley remained seated behind her, still, quiet, present. Vanessa's attorney responded quickly. Your Honor, this filing misrepresents a stable co-parenting arrangement. Mr. Gonzales is attempting to control access through excessive documentation and professional influence. Naomi didn't react. She simply opened the first folder. We'll begin with Exhibit A. Screens activated in the courtroom. Brookstone Elementary parking lot footage, time-stamped, clear. Derek stepping aggressively toward Bradley. Derek grabbing Bradley's arm. Multiple parents turning their attention. The judge leaned forward slightly. Who is this individual? She asked. Naomi answered immediately. Mr. Derek Whitmore, Your Honor. Cohabitating partner of the respondent. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Derek straightened quickly. Naomi continued. This incident occurred during school pickup hours in the presence of minor children. The judge watched the footage without interruption. No expression, just observation. Continue? She said. Naomi moved to the next exhibit. Text messages. Vanessa's communication patterns. Selective language choices. Coaching phrases referencing emotional framing of custody. Then Derek's written statement appeared on screen. Bradley watched carefully. Not because it hurt him, because it confirmed structure. Derek's own words describe Bradley as emotionally detached, controlling through silence and intimidating through calm behavior. Judge Hastings raised an eyebrow slightly. Is this submitted as evidence or opinion, she asked. Naomi responded. Submitted voluntarily by Mr. Whitmore. Through Respondent's Counsel, Your Honor. Silence settled again. Vanessa leaned toward her attorney, whispering. Too late. The judge had already read enough. Proceed, Judge Hastings said. Then Naomi introduced financial and behavioral documentation. Each file appeared one by one. Employment verification discrepancies, inflated professional titles, vendor irregularity flags, unauthorized information inquiry attempts directed at Meridian Atlas personnel during active review. Derek shifted slightly in his seat. Bradley noticed. Not panic yet, but strain. Naomi's voice stayed calm. No allegation is made regarding criminal conduct, Your Honor. However, the pattern demonstrates repeated misrepresentation and instability during a period where minor children were exposed to his behavior. Judge Hastings looked directly at Derek for the first time. Do you contest these records? Derek swallowed slightly. Yes, Your Honor. These are misinterpretations taken out of context. Naomi immediately responded. Context does not change verified discrepancies. Derek turned toward Vanessa briefly, just once, and Bradley saw it clearly. Expectation. He expected her to support him more forcefully. But Vanessa didn't speak. That moment mattered more than anything else, because alliances built on convenience always collapsed under legal pressure. The judge leaned back slightly, then turned to Bradley. Mr. Gonzales, you may speak briefly if you choose. Bradley stood slowly. No urgency, no performance, just controlled movement. He stepped forward, paused, looked at the judge directly. My only concern is stability for Ava and Mason. The judge studied him. Nothing further. No, Your Honor. That simplicity mattered. Naomi had prepared him carefully for this moment. No emotional appeals, no accusations, just consistency. Judge Hastings made a note, then turned back to the evidence. After 30 minutes of continued review, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Vanessa's attorney spoke again. Your Honor, Mr. Gonzales has maintained excessive documentation that appears targeted rather than cooperative. Naomi responded immediately. All documentation was collected in real time without alteration. The children's welfare is the only consistent variable. The judge interrupted. Has there been any physical harm to the children's silence? Vanessa hesitated. Derek looked down briefly. A fraction of a second too long. Bradley noticed that too. No physical harm has been reported, Vanessa's attorney answered. Naomi didn't stop there. There have been documented instances of aggressive behavior around the children, including verbal escalation and physical intimidation toward Mr. Gonzales during school pickup. Derek shifted again in his chair. That detail landed harder. Because school pickup incidents carry weight in custody evaluations. Judge Hastings closed the file momentarily, then looked directly at Vanessa. Do you believe this environment is stable for your children? Vanessa hesitated. That hesitation mattered more than the answer. Because judges notice hesitation when parents are expected to protect. I believe we're all adjusting, she said finally. Derek leaned slightly forward, as if trying to support her answer visually. But it was too late. The structure of the case had already shifted. The judge made a note, then spoke clearly. Based on preliminary review of submitted documentation and behavioral evidence, I am issuing a temporary modification of custody structure effective immediately. The room went completely still. Vanessa froze. Derek's face tightened instantly. Naomi remained composed. Bradley did not react at all. Judge Hastings continued, Mr. Gonzales will maintain primary physical custody during the interim evaluation period. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Derek whispered something under his breath, but the judge raised her hand. Any violation of this order will result in further court action. This hearing is adjourned. Gavel strike. Final. The sound echoed more than usual, because consequences had just been assigned. Outside the courtroom, everything felt quieter. Too quiet. Vanessa stepped out first, her movements slower now, less controlled. Derek followed behind her, but he didn't speak immediately. Not until they reached the hallway. Then he finally turned toward Bradley, and for the first time there was no performance left in his expression. Only frustration. This isn't over, Derek said quietly. Bradley looked at him calmly. No, he answered. It isn't. That response hit differently. Because Bradley didn't sound threatening, he sounded factual. Vanessa stood nearby, silent now, watching both of them. But something had changed in her posture too. Something smaller, less certain, as if she was finally seeing the structure of what she had participated in. Derek turned away first, walked down the hallway faster than necessary. Vanessa stayed behind for a moment, then looked at Bradley. Her voice came out softer than before. You didn't have to do this. Bradley met her eyes. I didn't do anything outside the system. That sentence landed heavily because it was true, and truth, when fully documented, leaves very little room for interpretation. Vanessa looked away. For the first time, she didn't have a response. Bradley left the courthouse 10 minutes later with Naomi. Snow had started falling again outside, slow, quiet, controlled, exactly like everything that had just happened inside. Naomi closed her folder as they walked. You stayed calm, she said. I always do. I know, she replied. That's why you won. Bradley didn't respond immediately, because he didn't think in terms of winning. He thought in terms of stability, safety, structure. But as they reached the parking lot, his phone buzzed. A message from Ava. Dad, are we okay now? Bradley stopped walking for a moment, then typed a simple response. Yes, we are safe. He sent it. And for the first time in a long time, the word safe didn't feel like something he had to maintain alone. The first week after the hearing didn't feel like victory. It felt like silence returning after a long storm. Vanessa didn't call as often. Derek didn't appear near Brookstone Elementary anymore. And the neighborhood itself seemed to breathe differently when Bradley drove through Maple Ridge with Ava and Mason in the mornings. But Bradley knew better than to interpret silence as peace. Silence was just absence of visible movement. At Meridian Atlas, Derek Whitmore's name disappeared from active systems within 48 hours of the court decision. Not because of the custody case, because internal review completion had already sealed his professional outcome. Evelyn Cho placed the final confirmation file on Bradley's desk without speaking at first. Then she finally said he's gone from the system. Bradley looked at the document once, then closed it. "That's it for us," she answered. "Yes." Bradley leaned back slightly. No satisfaction, no relief. Just completion. "Most people fight harder at the end," Evelyn added. "They fight for image," Bradley replied, "not truth." That line stayed in the air longer than expected, because inside Meridian Atlas image usually won, until it didn't. Meanwhile, Vanessa's life began collapsing in quieter ways. Not dramatic, not public, just unstable. The first sign came through Ava. "She's not sleeping well," Ava said one night while folding laundry in the living room. Bradley looked up from Mason's homework. "What makes you say that?" "She's always awake when I text her late." Bradley said nothing. Because children often notice things adults tried to hide through timing. The second sign came through Mason. "Derek doesn't come over anymore," he said casually while eating cereal. Bradley paused slightly. "He doesn't." Mason shook his head. He said, "Mom is stressed all the time now." That word again. Stressed. A polite substitute for collapsing control. At Maple Ridge Elementary, teachers began noticing changes too. Ava's debate coach pulled Bradley aside one afternoon. "She's performing better," the coach said, "but she seems quieter emotionally." Bradley nodded. "She's processing." The coach studied him. Children don't usually process like that unless something shifted at home. Bradley met her gaze calmly. "There was a legal adjustment recently. That was enough explanation and enough closure. But Vanessa was not done adjusting. One Thursday evening, she showed up at Bradley's house without warning. No call, no message, just headlights in the driveway at 7:18 p.m. Bradley opened the door before she knocked. She stood there for a moment holding a paper bag from a bakery downtown. "I brought dinner," she said. Bradley didn't move aside immediately. The silence between them wasn't hostile anymore. It was uncertain. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know." She looked past him into the house. Ava was sitting at the table doing homework. Mason was building something out of Lego pieces on the floor. Normal? Stable? Quiet? Vanessa's expression changed slightly. Not anger, not regret, something closer to realization. "I didn't expect it to be this calm here," she admitted. Bradley stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated before entering, not because she was unwelcome, but because she suddenly seemed unsure of her role in the space. The house smelled like warm food and pencil erasers. Mason looked up first. "Hi, Mom." Ava followed a second later. "Hey." No tension, just distance. Vanessa set the bag on the counter slowly. "I wanted to talk," she said. Bradley stayed near the doorway. About what? She looked at him directly now. "I think I made things bigger than they were." That sentence was carefully chosen. Not an apology, but close. Bradley didn't interrupt. "I thought Derek was stable," she continued. "I thought he understood family structure better than she stopped, then corrected herself. Better than I did." That admission mattered more than anything she had said in months, because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't strategic, it was reflective. Ava watched quietly from the table. Children always watch timing more than words. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "I didn't realize how fast things were moving until it was too late." Bradley finally spoke. "You were trying to replace uncertainty with confidence?" She nodded slightly. "Yes. Confidence isn't stability, I know that now." Silence returned, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was tired. Vanessa looked at Mason, then Ava, then back at Bradley. "I don't want them caught in the middle anymore," she said quietly. Bradley studied her carefully. That's the first accurate thing you've said in a while. It wasn't harsh, just factual. Vanessa almost reacted defensively, then stopped herself, because she understood she no longer had space for that. I'm going to step back from all of it, she said. Bradley didn't respond immediately. He didn't trust declarations made under emotional pressure, but he did trust patterns. Step back, how he asked. I'll follow the schedule exactly. No changes, no adjustments, no involving anyone else. Bradley watched her carefully. Even Derek, that name, created a small pause. Yes, no hesitation this time. Ava looked up slightly at that. Mason continued building his Lego tower without looking at anyone. Bradley nodded once. Then we moved forward. That sentence didn't forgive, but it structured direction. Vanessa looked relieved in a way that surprised even her, because she had expected punishment. Instead, she got boundaries, clear ones. Bradley moved toward the kitchen. Eat before it gets cold. That was all. No speech, no emotional closure. Just normal life continuing. Later that night after Vanessa left, Ava sat beside Bradley on the couch. Is Mom okay? She asked. Bradley didn't answer immediately, because okay meant different things depending on context. She's adjusting, he said finally. Ava leaned back slightly. You don't hate her? Bradley looked at her. No. Even after everything, Ava seemed to think about that carefully. Then Derek seemed scary sometimes. Bradley nodded slightly. He relied on appearances more than reality. Ava frowned. What does that mean? It means he needed people to believe him more than he needed to be correct. Ava processed that quietly, then nodded slowly. People at school do that too, she said. Bradley looked at her. Most people do it somewhere, he replied. Ava went quiet for a moment, then asked the question she had clearly been holding for weeks. Are we done now? Bradley considered that carefully. Yes, he said finally. The unstable part is done. Ava seemed to accept that, not fully understand it, but accept it. At Meridian Atlas, life returned to predictable rhythm, meetings, reports, approvals. Bradley's role didn't change. If anything, his internal trust increased slightly after the Whitmore case concluded. Evelyn noticed it first. You're being asked to review 2 more candidates this quarter, she said. Bradley didn't look up from his monitor. Normal volume. They specifically requested your oversight. That made him pause slightly. Why? Evelyn hesitated. 'Cause your files are uncontestable. Bradley returned to his screen. That's not a compliment. It's not criticism either, she replied. It was simply fact. Outside the office, Columbus continued moving, unaware, unbothered. Normal life rarely acknowledged the systems working beneath it. That evening, Bradley drove home alone after picking up Mason from basketball. Snow began falling again. Soft, quiet. Ava sat in the back seat scrolling through debate notes. Mason hummed quietly to himself. The truck moved through Maple Ridge streets under orange streetlights, reflecting off wet pavement. A normal drive, a stable moment. Then Ava spoke without looking up. Derek won't come back, right? Bradley kept his eyes on the road. No, because of court, because of documentation. Ava nodded. That made sense to her now. Mason leaned forward between the seats. Good, he said simply. Bradley almost smiled, almost, but didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long time, nothing required escalation anymore, just continuation. And that, in Bradley Gonzales' life, was the closest thing to peace. Maple Ridge looked different in winter when nothing was fighting for attention. No arguments in driveways, no late-night headlights rushing in or out. Just quiet streets softened by fresh snow that made even old mistakes look temporarily harmless. Bradley Gonzales noticed that kind of detail more than most people. Not because he liked silence, but because silence usually meant systems were holding. Sunday morning started like most Sundays now, predictable, controlled. Bradley stood in the kitchen wearing a gray sweatshirt, flipping pancakes on a pan that had belonged to his mother. Mason sat at the counter, swinging his legs, waiting impatiently, while Ava poured orange juice into 3 glasses with careful precision. No phones on the table, no noise from outside, just the steady sound of cooking and soft winter light coming through the window. Mason broke the silence first. "Can we go to the park later?" Bradley nodded. "If it doesn't snow harder." Ava glanced outside. "It's already snowing harder." Bradley looked too. She was right, but lightly. Not enough to cancel anything yet. That was life now, small adjustments instead of sudden disruptions. After breakfast, Bradley helped Mason tighten the bolts on a small bike he had been trying to fix for weeks. The training wheels had already been removed, leaving the bike slightly unstable when stopped. "You'll fall a few times," Bradley said. Mason frowned. "I know." "That's fine. Falling is part of balance." Ava sat on the porch steps watching them. "You always say that," she called out. "It's still true," Bradley replied. Mason pushed off. The bike wobbled immediately, once, twice, then stabilized. Not perfect, but moving forward. Ava smiled slightly at that. Later that afternoon, Vanessa arrived exactly on time, not early, not late, exactly on schedule. Bradley noticed that immediately. Behavioral consistency mattered. She stepped out of her car holding a small box of winter gloves for the kids. No perfume, no rushed energy, no emotional weight visible on her face, just controlled neutrality, a different version of her than before. Bradley met her at the driveway. "You're early," she said automatically. "It's time," he answered. That small correction made her pause for a fraction of a second. Then she nodded. "Right." Ava and Mason came outside bundled in coats. Mason ran first. Ava followed more slowly. Vanessa knelt slightly to adjust Mason's scarf. "I got you new gloves," she said gently. Mason looked at them. "Cool." Ava took hers quietly. "Thanks." No tension, just distance now. Vanessa stood again and looked at Bradley. For a moment she seemed like she wanted to say more. Something larger, something emotional. But she didn't, because there was nothing left that wouldn't destabilize the structure they had rebuilt. Instead, she spoke carefully. "I'm going to stick to the schedule from now on." Bradley nodded. "I know." That answer surprised her slightly. "You believe me?" Bradley looked at her. "I observe consistency, not promises." Vanessa understood that immediately, and for the first time she didn't try to argue with it. Mason climbed into her car. Ava followed. Before closing the door, Ava looked at Bradley. "See you tonight." "Yeah." The door shut. The car pulled away, slow, controlled, no abrupt movements. Bradley watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then he went back inside. The house felt quieter again, but not empty. Different now. Stabilized. That evening, Bradley sat at the kitchen table alone, reviewing nothing. No files, no reports, no systems to evaluate. Just a cup of coffee, cooling slowly beside him. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing requiring immediate documentation. No threats forming. No instability building. Just time. At 8:17 p.m., Ava called. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Do you think Mom is unhappy?" Bradley leaned back slightly in his chair. That was a complex question, not because of the answer, because of what the answer meant to her. "She made choices that created stress," he said carefully. Ava stayed quiet for a moment. Then Derek made her worse, right? Bradley didn't correct her framing. He adjusted it. He amplified existing instability. Ava seemed to accept that. Then her voice softened. "I don't want people like that around us anymore." Bradley looked toward the hallway where Mason's shoes sat neatly lined by the door. "They aren't." A pause. Then Ava added quietly, "I like it better like this." Bradley understood what she meant. Not perfect, not exciting, just stable. "Good," he said. After the call ended, Bradley stayed at the table for a while longer. The house made small sounds around him, heating system adjusting, wood settling. Wind outside, shifting snow against the windows. Normal life. The kind most people didn't appreciate until it became uncertain. At Meridian Atlas the next morning, Evelyn left a file on his desk labeled Internal Review Closure Summary. Bradley opened it briefly. Whitmore case closed. No further action, no appeal path, no reentry eligibility, clean separation. Evelyn watched him carefully. Feels final, she said. It is, Bradley replied. You ever think about how fast it escalated? Bradley closed the file. No. Why not? Because escalation is irrelevant once structure is restored. Evelyn studied him for a moment. You're not what people think you are. Bradley looked at her. What do they think I am? She hesitated. Cold. He nodded once. And what am I? Controlled. That was closer, but still incomplete. Bradley returned to his monitor. Control is not the objective, he said quietly. Stability. Evelyn didn't respond, but she understood. That afternoon, Bradley picked up Ava and Mason from Vanessa's house. Everything followed schedule now. No deviations, no tension. Vanessa handed over the children calmly. Have a good week, she said. You too, Bradley replied. Not warm, not cold, just neutral. As the children got into the truck, Mason spoke first. We're going to the Science Museum next weekend, right? If you finish your homework, Bradley said. Mason nodded seriously. Deal. Ava leaned back in her seat. I have debate practice Tuesday. I know. The truck pulled away. Vanessa stood on the driveway watching. Not chasing, not reacting, just observing. For the first time, she looked like someone no longer trying to control outcomes beyond her reach. At a red light, Ava looked at Bradley. Do you think people can really change? Bradley considered the question. Yes, he said finally, but only when consequences are consistent enough to require it. Ava nodded slowly. That made sense to her now. Mason interrupted from the back seat. I like it when everything is boring. Bradley almost smiled. Boring is underrated, he said. Snow began falling again as they drove through Maple Ridge. Soft, even, predictable, the kind of weather that didn't demand reaction, only continuation. And for Bradley Gonzales, that was the closest thing life ever offered to certainty. Not victory, not revenge, just a system finally no longer breaking. He drove forward slowly through the white streets and didn't look back.